Looks like we're live. Good morning, friends. Good to be here with you this morning. It is Friday. It's Good Friday. It's Good Friday. Um, Always struggled with that idea of Good Friday. You know, kind of hard to be. Not like a happy day, but good doesn't necessarily mean happy. Good is something other than that. But I'm coming to you live this morning. Yes, it's unusual because it's Friday, but it's a different day. It's a different day. Um, so today is day 5 of our journey through the book of Mark. Relatively short gospel, only 16 chapters. Today is day 5, so that means that's right. It's chapter 5 as well. Day 5, chapter 5. Pretty easy to make that connection. I'm coming to you live from home today, so I've got just my laptop and my phone. So I'm going to be using both as I try to track here and see if you have any comments or questions. You can put them in the stream, comment on the stream here on Facebook or YouTube. If you do YouTube, I won't see that until later. But if you do Facebook, I'll try to see it right away. May not see it until later. And we'll also see any texts if you wanted to shoot me a text. 570-351-1619. And go ahead and check in, say something in the stream, say good morning or hello. I see some folks are already doing that. Good morning, Cindy. Again, good morning again. Saw Cindy and John a little bit earlier today at the YMCA's Good Friday worship at 7:30. It was chilly there, but it was nice to be around people. And the coffee was pretty good. But Good Friday worship, speaking of Good Friday worship, I'll be doing something live at noon. That'll be live streamed Facebook, YouTube, and our website, umcchrist.org, live at noon. And if you're unavailable to do it at noon, you'll be able to see it in recording, as a recording almost immediately on Facebook. And for some reason, it takes YouTube a little while. Sometimes it's there almost right away, and other times it's a few hours before it gets there. Don't know why. But nothing in person today. And that service is not really super long. It might take a half an hour of time to go through it, and just very meditative kind of thing. Easter is Sunday, and we'll have the 3, 7 o'clock, 8:15, and 10:45. 10:45 is the only one that'll be live streamed. The others will, all 3 will be in person. The 10:45 will be live streamed as well. Anyway, just checking in here with everyone. Good morning, Gwendolyn. Good to see you as well. Great to have you with us. So was the message pretty good? Oh well, thank you, Cindy. Nice to hear that. I appreciate that. Anyway, so chapter 5, day 5, chapter 5, and I'm going to bring up. I'm going to share my screen and bring up a picture here. This is the little map. Since I'm from home, I don't have a green screen behind me, so I can't just show it. But this way, you'll get a little bit better view. I won't be in the way of it. So this is the region of Galilee, where Jesus is spending most of his time here in the beginning of Mark. Excuse me. And he was yesterday was somewhere in this area of Capernaum, in and around Capernaum, by the seashore. In today's reading, chapter 5, he's going to travel, it's going to say across the lake, okay, across the lake, across the sea, whichever way yours might say it, across the Sea of Galilee or Lake Tiberias to somewhere over in here. And the name of the place is, depends on your translation, Gerasenes is the way this one translates it. Somewhere over here. In other words, if you've been following along, you'll know, and if not, that's okay. This might be new for you. To a Gentile region. This is Gentile territory that Jesus is landing in. And it's the area of the Decapolis, the 10 towns or 10 cities 10 towns is probably more accurate. So he's over on this side in today's reading. I'm going to stop the share and get back to us, though. All right. So you have an idea of how this is going, and then halfway through, he's going to come back across. When we get to the second half, I'll mention again, but we're going to see another one of those Markan sandwiches in today's reading. So here we go. Chapter 5, verse 1. Hello, Shell. So they arrived at the other side of the lake in the region of the Gerasenes. When Jesus climbed out of the boat, a man possessed by an evil spirit came out from the tombs to meet him. This man lived in the burial caves and could no longer be restrained, even with a chain. Whenever he was put into chains and shackles, as he often was, he snapped the chains from his wrists and smashed the shackles. No one was strong enough to subdue him. Day and night, he wandered among the burial caves and in the hills, howling and cutting himself with sharp stones. Pause. So Mark describes the man as being possessed, an evil spirit or unclean spirit, as your translation might say. Since he is considered unclean, he would not be allowed to live with people. So quite literally, he is living amongst the dead. He is living amongst the dead. It's pretty, it's very, very dramatic, very poetic, the way Mark writes that. He's living amongst the dead. He's living, in the cemetery, in a burial cave, in a tomb. That's where he's living. When the first century, when they write about unclean spirits and demon possessed, we can look at a couple different ways. We could say, they literally had demons, or we can look at it and say, it's a pre-medical society and pre-scientific, and everything was kind of written off as being demons and unclean spirits. The man may have had psychological issues, and was unable to be with people because of that. So it's okay to kind of update and say that might be what happened, because if you study what he is, and I'm sure a psychiatrist can come up with some diagnosis for him, and there are conditions, medical conditions and psychological conditions that give persons virtually inexplicable strength when they go on a rampage, so to speak. So could be that kind of thing. And he's cutting himself and injuring himself and hurting himself. Oh, thank you, Gwen. That is so kind of you to say. Good morning, Colleen. That's the situation that this man is living in. That's the situation that he's living in. When Jesus was still some distance away, the man saw him, ran to meet him, and bowed low before him. With a shriek, he screamed, "Why are you interfering with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? In the name of God, I beg you, don't torture me." For Jesus had already said to the spirit, "Come out of the man, you evil spirit." Then Jesus demanded, "What is your name?" And he replied, "My name is Legion, because there are many of us inside this man." Pause. Legion was a Roman term for a large group, usually military. You send them out in a legion. Okay, continuing. Then the evil spirits begged him again and again not to send them to some distant place. There happened to be a large herd of pigs feeding on the hillside nearby. "Send us into those pigs," the spirits begged. "Let us enter them." So Jesus gave them permission. The evil spirits came out of the man and entered the pigs, and the entire herd of about 2,000 pigs plunged down the steep hillside into the lake and drowned in the water. Pause. Because there's a lot there. So there's a herd of pigs nearby. That's another hint that we're definitely talking about Gentile land, Gentile territory. No good Jew would be raising pigs, right? That would go. It's not kosher. They wouldn't have them. So it's definitely Gentile land where Jesus is. All right, we might let that kind of slide by us. And it's interesting that Mark has Jesus sending unclean spirits into pigs, which would have been considered unclean animals to start with. And so he might be trying to say something there. Again, we don't know of how Jewish Mark was, because sometimes his when he tries to be Jewish and when he tries to quote scripture, he often gets things wrong. And Matthew has to correct it when you get to Matthew's gospel a few years later. But in this case, maybe he is trying to say something about that. And Mark, well, Jesus, in all four gospels, Jesus tends to use hyperbole. And I think Mark is using hyperbole here when he says 2,000 pigs are there. Let's not read that number literally, just say a large group of pigs. Because the odds of someone having 2,000 pigs in the first century, unheard of. Same thing goes when Jesus talks about the having a flock of 100 sheep. No one had 100 sheep. That was definitely hyperbole. No one was wealthy enough to have 100 sheep. And if they did, they certainly wouldn't go after one, because it's a waste or whatever. So continuing. The herdsman, again, who must have been Gentile, not Jewish, fled to the nearby town and the surrounding countryside, spreading the news as they ran. People rushed out to see what had happened. A crowd soon gathered around Jesus, and they saw the man who had been possessed by the legion of demons. He was sitting there, fully clothed and perfectly sane, and they were all afraid. Then those who had seen what had happened told the others about the demon-possessed man and the pigs. And the crowd began pleading with Jesus to go away and leave them alone. Pause. Go away, leave us alone. They certainly didn't encounter what they had anticipated to encounter. They were used to seeing this guy crazy, demon-possessed, whatever way you wanted to say it. But here he is, sane, fully clothed, sitting with living people. Wow, that seems weird. Very out of the ordinary, very unexpected, and they were confused and, yes, afraid. Big word today. And they just want Jesus to go away. Why? Well, I mean, we could say multiple reasons why, right? One being they like the idea of things being like they always were. And this guy is changing things. And he's too much power would be the other thing, right? Who is this guy that can do this kind of thing? I'm more scared of him than I was the crazy guy that was demon possessed guy, whatever it was, right? I'm more scared of him than I ever was of that guy, and I thought he was bad. So, a couple different things taking place. As Jesus was getting into the boat, the man who had been demon possessed begged to go with him. But Jesus said, "No, go home to your family and tell them everything the Lord has done for you and how merciful he has been." So the man started off to visit the 10 towns, the Decapolis, of that region, and began to proclaim the great things Jesus had done for him. And everyone was amazed at what he told them. Pause. So the guy wanted to follow Jesus, right? He wanted to become another follower, another disciple. It's almost like I want to be your servant kind of thing. I owe you my life is basically what he was saying, which culture and custom might have said that's what you're supposed to do. This guy gave you your life back. You now owe him your life, because that is literally what Jesus did. The man was virtually dead, right? He was living amongst the dead, so he was virtually dead. And now he's giving the man his life back. So the guy is saying, my life is yours. Let me go with you. What does Jesus want? No. Jesus wants to restore him to his family. Go back to your family. Well, your family probably misses you. Your family probably misses you. I'm giving you your life so that you can live it. So that you can live it. Go back to your family. And while you're at it, tell everyone what God has done for you. It's interesting, isn't it? That because what does the guy do? He goes and does exactly what Jesus asked him to do. He goes back to his family. He heads off in the direction of the Decapolis and to that whole region. And he's telling everybody he can find what God has done for him, exactly what Jesus asked him to do. But think back a couple chapters to that leper in chapter 2, right? I think it was in chapter 2, when Jesus told him, don't tell anybody, just go to the priest and do everything you're supposed to do. The guy didn't listen. And now we can say, well, the guy was overwhelmed and overjoyed at what Jesus had done for him, and that's true. But so was this guy. So was this guy. And yeah, great news like that can be hard to keep and hard to hold on to. But I think there's something else in there that the Jewish man, the leper, presumably Jewish anyway, because of where he was living, it doesn't follow the what Jesus tells him to do in response. But the guy who is like cast out so far, living amongst the dead, most likely Gentile or pagan, not even a God follower, is the one that follows the instructions of Jesus. Anyway, I think there's something there. Okay, so now before we get into verse 21, I think that's 21. My lighting in here isn't the best, especially for my old eyes. We're now going to see the next version, the next helping of a Markan sandwich. Remember the Markan sandwich, 2 stories. Mark splits one in half, or in 2 pieces anyway. So you've got story A, part 1 here, and story A, part 2 here. They become the bread. And then Mark inserts a second story in between. That's the filling in the sandwich. Sometimes we read them too quickly and we miss it. These are 2 different stories. They might be similar in some ways, but one story interrupts the other one. One story interrupts the other one. All right. So, and now remember, where is Jesus? Jesus is on the eastern shore of the Sea of Galilee, somewhere in the area of the Gerasenes, and now he's going to head back across the Sea of Galilee, back across the lake, somewhere around Capernaum, perhaps. Anyway, somewhere on the western shore. So now we're back to verse 21. Jesus got into the boat again and went back to the other side of the lake, where a large crowd gathered around him on the shore. Then a leader of the local synagogue, whose name was Jairus, arrived. When he saw Jesus, he fell at his feet, pleading fervently. My little daughter is dying, he said. Please come and lay your hands on her and heal her so she can live. Jesus went with him, and all the people followed, crowding around him. Pause. And actually, even that verse. That was the first part of story A. Now we're going to read story B. Continuing, a woman in the crowd had suffered for 12 years with constant bleeding. She had suffered a great deal from many doctors, and over the years she had spent everything she had to pay them, but she had gotten no better. In fact, she had gotten worse. She had heard about Jesus, so she came up behind him through the crowd and touched his robe. For she thought to herself, if I could just touch his robe, I will be healed. Immediately, the bleeding stopped, and she could feel in her body that she had been healed of her terrible condition. Pause. Got a few verses left to this story, but I needed to pause there. because there's a lot. So the woman, 12 years with a bleeding condition. We're not talking any kind of a bleeding condition. We're talking literally menstruation, and the menstruation that won't stop. Okay. No, menstruation itself in Jewish culture was an unclean condition. A woman during that time, a woman menstruating would be considered unclean. You don't touch, you got to stay away from, because then you would become ceremonially unclean and couldn't participate in many aspects of the life of the community, especially worship. So this woman has spent 12 years kind of living on the edge of society, having to stay away from people and avoiding contact with people at the risk of making them unclean and unable to participate in aspects of society and worship. She's almost as dead as the crazy guy or the demon possessed guy would have been, at least socially speaking. So she's risking a lot. She's there in a crowd, which she shouldn't be. She's willing to touch a man, which she shouldn't be doing, at least not according to society. She's risking like all of it. She's risking all of it. She's already spent everything she had on doctors, and they couldn't do anything for her. So now she's willing to risk everything. Like, what wouldn't you risk, I guess, right? To rejoin society, to relearn life, rejoin life. Okay, continuing. So she touches, and immediately, just touching his hem of his robe. Cool little song that Bishop Park likes to sing about that too. She feels it, and she knows that she's been healed. Verse 30, Jesus realized at once that healing power had gone out from him. So he turned around in the crowd and asked, "Who touched my robe?" His disciples said to him, "Look at the crowd pressing around you. How can you ask who touched me?" But he kept on looking around to see who had done it. Then the frightened woman, trembling at the realization of what had happened to her, came and fell to her knees in front of him and told him what she had done. And he said to her, "Daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace. Your suffering is over." Pause. Can you picture that scene too, though? I mean, and can you hear how gentle and compassionate Jesus' words must have been to that woman? The idea that someone could see her was probably almost overpowering in itself. Living that kind of a life, like shunned by society, nobody saw her, but Jesus did. That was probably almost as amazing for her and beautiful, maybe even more so than the healing that had taken place. Continuing, while he was still speaking to her. Okay, pause. I should pause. So now we're back. Now we're going to be back to story A. Now we're going to be back to story A. While he was still speaking to her, messengers arrived from the home of Jairus, the leader of the synagogue. They told him, "Your daughter is dead. There's no use troubling the teacher now." But Jesus overheard them and said to Jairus, "Don't be afraid, just have faith." Just have faith. Pause. I'm wondering, their statement, don't. There's no use troubling the teacher now. Is there any? Are they saying that with any kind of an accusatory tone, like Jesus wasted too much time? Don't bother him now. There's no use troubling him now. Tone can mean so much, right? It changes our understanding of things. So if we read that in a couple different ways, we might understand it in a couple different ways. So continuing, then Jesus stopped the crowd and wouldn't let anyone go with him except Peter, James, and John, the brother of James. Pause. So this is I think this is the first time in Mark that those three are set apart, right? We've got all of his followers. He named a whole bunch of followers, the ones that were going to be following him. Then specifically, Mark said he named the 12. In that passage in chapter 3, he named them as apostles, and here he's referred to them as disciples. But this is the first time he's out of those 12, Jesus has set aside, has picked, has named Peter, James, and John. It's not going to be the last time. It's not going to be the last time. They become sort of like the center circle out of the larger circle. Like if you're looking at a target, you got the largest group of followers, then you've got the 12 disciples, and now you've got the bullseye, or almost the ring just outside the bullseye, because the bullseye would be Jesus, but the small ring just outside of Jesus, outside the bullseye, would seem to be Peter, James, and John. That turns up again and again throughout the Gospels. So continuing, when they came to the home of the synagogue leader, Jesus saw much commotion and weeping and wailing. Pause. Weeping and wailing is an important part of, crying is an important part of mourning, of grief. Nothing wrong with it. But it was an especially important part of the job in first century. In fact, people were paid to be mourners, to be weepers. They would show up and get paid to cry. They would show up and get paid to cry. The more crying you did, the more you loved the person. The more crying you had going on around, the more you loved the person who died. So continuing, he went inside and asked, why all this commotion and weeping? The child isn't dead. She's only asleep. The crowd laughed at him, but he made them all leave. Get out, get out, get out. And he took the girl's father and mother and his 3 disciples into the room where the girl was lying. Holding her hand, he said to her, Talitha koumi, which means, little girl, get up. Pause. I probably mispronounced the Aramaic, but oh well. It's a dead language. I don't think anybody really knows how to say it anyway. And the girl, who was 12 years old, immediately stood up and walked around. They were overwhelmed and totally amazed. Jesus gave them strict orders not to tell anyone what had happened, and then he told them to give her something to eat. Pause. End of chapter 5 as well. So again, Jesus is telling this one now, don't say anything. Don't say anything. Don't tell anybody. Don't tell anybody. Just give her something to eat. She needs something to eat. Why does Jesus kind of go back and forth? It seems to me that in Galilee, on the western side of the Sea of Galilee, he's more concerned with people not spreading the news about what he's done. But on the eastern side, over in the Decapolis, he wants the guy to go and tell people. And so I'm wondering if that's because Jesus knows he can't spend a whole lot of time on the eastern shore over there. So, and his disciples need to stay with him. So he almost like he made that guy an apostle, that he sent him to do something, to do this task, and to spread the news, because he knew that he wasn't going to be able to do it, and he knew his disciples weren't going to be able to do it. He said, but over here on this side, I don't need you going around saying things about me or what I'm doing, because I'm going to do that myself, and my disciples are going to do that myself. I want you to take care of your daughter. Give her the food she needs. Anyway, it was just my thoughts on that part. So that's it for chapter 5. Woo-hoo. So tomorrow is Saturday. Tomorrow is my Sue day. So no Bible reading tomorrow. We'll be back on Sunday morning, 9:15 ish, 9:15 ish, with chapter 6, of the reading, and that should be live 9:15 ish, whenever I get done with the first service and have time in between the two services to do chapter 6. Next week will be Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, live all 4 days. Friday probably won't be live. I think I'm going to pre-record Fridays next week so that I can have my Sabbath next week. But you'll see it live at 9 o'clock next week. So that should be 6 through 11, I think, will be next week, right? 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, maybe something like that. Anyway, no, whatever. I don't know. No, that would be 11. I think that would be 11 next week. And then the following week, we've got just like the 5 to wrap up for the week, something like that. Anyway, that gives you the idea of what's going on. What faith? Yes, what faith indeed. What faith indeed. And I think you're probably talking about the woman. Yes. Thank you for joining me this morning, everybody, and thanks for your kind words. I'm glad that I heard from somebody specifically last night how much this has meant, and then the person got hooked after watching one. So that's great. Thank you. I'm humbled. I truly am. I love the idea that God is using me to speak to you in a way that's helpful and meaningful. That means a lot and truly does humble me by that. So anyway, my friends, church, as you go about your day, every day, not just Good Friday, but every day, keep your eyes and ears open, physical and spiritual ones, for what God is doing in your life. We have a loving, caring, active, alive God who is at work in our lives. When you see it, say, "Thanks, Papa," and then tell somebody, including me, perhaps especially me. I need to hear these things. Anyway, have a blessed day. Be blessed.